And as Commissioner Chair, good evening and welcome to the June 10th, 2025 Joint Special Meeting of the Salinas Planning Commission. I am calling the meeting to order.
Okay, Patty?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief announcement before I do the Spanish translation. We're trying to get the broadcasting for Zoom, but we're broadcasting on YouTube. It's just a Zoom feed that's not coming through, but we do have access to, the viewers can hear, just not see the visual. Spanish translation for this meeting is available. This meeting is available in Spanish for members of the public in attendance and on Zoom. Translation devices could be obtained in the foyer. Esta reunión está disponible en español para los miembros del público y en Zoom las unidades de traducción se pueden obtener en la entrada de la rotonda. Zoom webinar participation is available for members of the public. The Zoom webinar ID and link are available on the posted agenda on the city's website.
All right, well, everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, and would you call the roll of the City Council, please?
Councilmember Barajas.
Present.
Councilmember Barrera. Here. Councilmember Diorigo.
Here.
Councilmember De La Rosa.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Here.
Mayor Donahue.
Yep, I'm here.
And please roll call for the commission.
Commissioner Almanza Larios. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Here.
Commissioner Meeks.
Here.
Commissioner Purnell. Here. Commissioner Rocamora.
Here.
Commissioner Ruck.
Here.
Commission Chair McKelvey Day.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, public comments are restricted to items on this special meeting agenda only. Public comments are generally limited to 2 minutes per speaker. I may further limit the time for public comments depending upon how things are moving along. Public comment may also be submitted via email, public comments at ci.salinas.ca.us, and will be entered into the record, and we will take the public related to the study session following the presentation and questions from the dais. And then just note for the record, this is a special session. The goal is to be done as close to or about 7 o'clock. So, but just a quick reminder before we get started, we'll look for Jonathan Moore to come up and give us a draft general plan update. We will take public comment once we hear from Jonathan, and then get questions from council and the planning commissioners. So with that, Jonathan, kick us off.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to the Council and Planning Commission and the staff for making this possible. Thank you for the members of the public for coming out today to hear more about the general plan update and where we are in this process, which is coming up on the release of a public review draft. And bear with me as I get used to this angle of presentation. And since we launched this update process in 2021, we've been coming to City Council and Planning Commission with quarterly updates, either with presentations or memos. We want to take this opportunity to kind of give you the broad overview of the process to date and prepare you with you and the public with context and information that will aid you in your review of the full draft general plan once that comes out. Great. Most of the current general plan, with the current notable exceptions, is still remaining from the last comprehensive update, now more than 20 years ago. The general plan is the city's guiding policy document and vision for future development. It's also a requirement under California state law, along with 8 required elements: land use, circulation, housing, noise, open space, conservation, environmental justice, and safety. We're also concurrently working on a climate action plan. And this is an opportunity to refine the community's vision after so long, address changes in state law, and update the plans with the priorities of the many community planning efforts that have happened in the recent years. The general plan itself is comprised of maps, figures, goals, actions, and policies that's implemented through a combination of ordinance changes, development review, programs, and actions, and projects, sorry. One of the primary implementation devices is, of course, the zoning code, which takes the high-level land use designations and translates that into the specific requirements for heights, setbacks, uses, and other things that especially the Planning Commission is very familiar with. General plan actions may also call for specific projects like a new library or a new park or programs such as those supporting affordable housing. There have been a lot of new requirements for general plans. The state law has changed significantly in the past 20 years. Most of these changes are related to two topics, climate change and housing. Some of the changes are about who we plan for different modes. Some of them change how we analyze different environmental impacts, and some of them require whole new elements. There have also been a host of bills around housing and also changes that require more strict time limits and consistency between your general plan and zoning code amendments. So we didn't start this update from scratch. The city and other local agencies have been doing a lot of planning work, especially in the last decade. We've counted over 30 different planning documents that we've discussed or elevated material from for this effort. And we already adopted a recent housing element in December of 2023 to meet that state deadline. Housing elements are on their own unique 8-year cycle, and we're the first community in Monterey County to have a adopted state-compliant housing element for this cycle. And our second most recently adopted element is the economic development element, or EDE. This was adopted in 2017, was also accepted as a strategic planning document as far back as 2014. It was intended as a foundation for a general plan update with over 400 goals, policies, and actions. And in addition to direct economic development topics, it also dive into land use, circulation, health, quality of life, and more. The EDE process also involved partnerships with community-based organizations that started an evolution in how the city conducts inclusive engagement and led to the LSL Vibrancy Plan and original Visión Salinas process. So the original Visión Salinas process, the kind of forefathers to this, was started in 2017 to coordinate public outreach events or outreach for multiple concurrent planning efforts and to develop a set of guiding principles and core value for this update. The guiding principles and core value were vetted through public engagement and included going to those simultaneous planning efforts, the LSL Vibrancy Plan, Chinatown Revitalization Plan, Parks, Rec, and Libraries Master Plan, and others. And it resulted in a core value of an inclusive, diverse, and welcoming city where all persons can thrive in 8 guiding principles. Something you may notice is a lot of overlap between these guiding principles and the city's council's recently adopted strategic plan, including focus areas of economic development, housing, youth, and improving city services and infrastructure. Developing this plan with the community is super important to us. We've had over 20 workshops, had 8 topic-specific working group meetings. We've brought content to numerous events and forums, including online through surveys and other tools. We've been to numerous events throughout the city. This process has been bilingual throughout, and it's still ongoing. We had a steering committee that helped guide us in this effort, especially in plan content and structure. That group met from 2021 to 2024, included appointees by the council and mayor from that time, as well as representative from the Planning Commission and other local groups and organizations such as Monterey Salinas Transit, SUBA, and so on. This group reviewed the draft goals, policies, and actions before we went into the draft administrative plan development. The steering committee helped us organize the plan to 3 pillars. As mentioned before, state law mandates certain topics and elements, but aside from housing, it gives jurisdictions a lot of latitude in how you organize those things and what additional topics you can add in. For each pillar, I'm going to summarize some of the things we heard in community engagement, some of the major policy themes, and some of the new additions to the general plan from this update. Starting with the built environment pillar. Since we're starting with built environment, it's useful to consider how Salinas has grown. Change and growth are constants through the last 100 years of Salinas history. In 1920, this was still a small village with under 5,000 people. And roughly every 2 decades since, it's doubled or tripled until the 2000s to bring us to over 160,000 people today. That number is still growing. The Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments Regional Growth Forecast in 2022 predicted over 175,000 residents by 2040. And looking at maps, we can really see how this population growth mirrors the city's physical growth over the years. So the area in purple represents the city's boundaries or developed area 4 years after incorporation. Nearly 7 years later, it was still a pretty small community. And really, it was after World War II that the city started rapidly expanding, including the annexation of the Alisal, which was developing alongside the city. And then by 1988, we kind of are getting close to what we know today. And then in the 90s, we had the Auto Mall and some of the other subdivisions south of Baranda Road. And once those subdivisions were complete and Montebello is also complete, we kind of arrived at what we have today. And the areas in gray represent some of the areas the city looked at in the 2002 general plan, and the economic development element is areas for future growth. The city, after the 2002 general plan, annexed a portion north of Baranda Road, where we have the 2 recently adopted specific plans, and we're working on the 3rd, the East Area Specific Plan. And we're also working on a specific plan for the annexed area north of Russell Road. So with all that in mind, where are we likely to see the most physical changes in the next 20 years, or kind of this general plan horizon? A lot of the city is made up of strong built-out neighborhoods that are likely to see smaller additions or changes. And along our major transit corridors in downtown, you might see some larger infill projects and other developments. And really the areas in dark blue are kind of where you might see the largest physical changes, where there are major proposed projects, such as Carr Lake, such as the future growth area neighborhoods or the Ag Industrial Center. From built environment engagement, we know that there are a lot of needs still in the community, and especially in the developed portion of the city, not a lot of space. Almost half of our existing land, built-out land, is dedicated towards housing, most of that low density. We only have 8% of the city designated for retail and office use, and about 3% for mixed use, which should be noted allows standalone housing and commercial development. How we allocate our land going forward and now directly impacts housing prices, commercial prices for rent too. And where we allow different uses also affects how far people have to travel, not just for jobs, but for meeting basic daily needs, for school, for recreation. We've also heard, as I know you all have, about sidewalk and road conditions and the need to improve our basic civic infrastructure. Now, major built environment policies, including creating a more flexible land use system to respond to these needs, enhancing community gateways and design while protecting Salinas history. There's also a focus on improving above and below ground infrastructure and circulation and access. One of the biggest proposed changes in the draft will be a new land use classification system called place types. As the name suggests, this system is more focused about the kind of places we want to create and form and flexibility than compared to some of the traditional land use designations. The place types and place type map also reflect land use recommendations from other recent plans, especially the economic development element and the downtown Alisal vibrancy plans. Incorporating these changes also sets the stage for streamlining and updating the zoning code. In some ways, this is a bigger conceptual shift than a major change in designations. Some of the areas where there is proposed allowed land use change include the Alisal Marketplace to reposition that for development, and on the northeast side of the city to reflect the East Area Specific Plan work, and to rethink some of the land in our sphere of influence, but that is not quite annexed yet east of Williams Road. The circulation element focuses on creating safe and feasible transportation options for all users, incorporating recommendations from the Active Transportation Plan, Vision Zero Plan, and Safe Routes to School. No one likes being stuck is traffic, so there are still traditional projects to address congestion and traffic flow. However, we have to realize that more people walking or on bikes or in transit also means less cars on the trip, on the roads. But we have to make it convenient and safe for people to want to actually use these options. Our second pillar is environment and sustainability, with the conservation and environmental safety element and open space element. We've heard that water is a big environmental concern, as is protecting the community from more frequent extreme weather and its knock-on effects. Salinas parks are the biggest and most often thought of and discussed component of our open space network, and our best opportunity to connect with the outdoors and natural environment. So the elements in this pillar include policy, focus on protecting the natural environment, increasing the ability of Salinas to adapt to climate change, and improving and enhancing our park system. One of the changes in state law on the screen earlier was SB 379, which requires addressing climate change and vulnerability, climate adaptation and vulnerability in your safety element. Safety elements traditionally address things like potential wildfires, flooding, seismic events, etc. So with the addition of climate to these topics, it made sense to pair this with conservation, which already discussed protecting water and other natural resources. Our open space element emphasizes prioritizing or implementing rather, the Parks, Rec, and Libraries Master Plan, which focuses on prioritizing our existing parks, improving those, while looking at key opportunities to also expand and add new park space when that makes sense. Examples of recent projects include Gloucester and Sartoris Parks, and of course, the Carr Lake Park project. And our third pillar is socioeconomic systems, which includes health and environmental justice, and 3 optional elements, public safety, economic development, and arts, culture, and youth. We've heard a lot about need for reinvestment throughout the community. We also know that residents support growing local businesses and want pathways to good-paying jobs and a bright future for their children, including programming and spaces for them to thrive. Major policy themes including creating a strong economy and a healthier community, providing appropriate public safety resources, and creating a bright future for youth, and using Salinas' art and heritage to create opportunities and a vibrant quality of life. There are a lot of new additions, especially in this pillar, starting with health and environmental justice element. Required by SB 1000 of 2016, this new element focuses on reducing negative health impacts by improving the quality of the built and natural environments. And it seeks to do this through maintaining and improving infrastructure and public facilities, including our green spaces, increasing access to healthy foods and affordable foods, increasing access to safe and healthy housing, fostering engagement and community leadership, and continuing investment in historically neglected areas. If you remember our last study session back in January, we talked about a proposed streamlined economic development element. Because we're doing a comprehensive update this time, it's an opportunity to reincorporate policy from the expansive 2017 EDE into their topic-related elements. So that means we use land use policy from the 2017 EDE in our land use element, housing in the housing element, so on. And this reorganizing would help it get to a streamlined EDE, more focused specifically on economic development topics. But we continue to work with stakeholders from the 2017 EDE to make sure we keep the essence of that document and are moving their priorities forward. This does mean we're probably looking at a full revised economic development element with the second public review draft of the general plan. So arts, culture, and youth and public safety are 2 new additional optional elements. And arts, culture, and youth elevates a lot of the priorities and policies from things like the Alice Vibrancy Plan and Public Art Master Plan. And the public safety element is about creating tools for nonviolent conflict resolution, crime prevention through environmental design, and having adequate emergency response and safety services, facilities, and infrastructure, including for fire, police, and mental health. Vision Salinas 2040 is not just an 11-element general plan update. It also includes a corresponding climate action plan and an environmental impact report. which will cover both the general plan and the climate action plan, and eventually a zoning code update. Because the general plan covers a lot of climate adaptation and resiliency in the elements, the climate action plan, which is a separate document, is focused on reducing the emissions driving these changes. The climate action plan will include short and long-term strategies calculated to help reduce the emissions on screen, such as facilitating electric vehicle ownership and greening and retrofitting our homes. There will also be a lot of connections with those related topics in the general plan elements. We're trying to come up with the right set of strategies that meet state targets at the same time that are equitable and feasible. Meeting state targets will help with mitigation not only in the environmental impact report for these documents, but can also help streamline future projects that are consistent with the climate action plan. When thinking about the climate action plan, it can be easy to kind of lose the forest through the trees, get hung up on some of the technical details, but making meaningful progress towards the strategies in the CAP will have a lot of additional benefits to make the community healthier and more prosperous. So this includes equipping homes not just with solar panels, but things like heat pump and other major electronic appliances to reduce utility costs and improve indoor air quality. We can't replace every commute, but we can make it easier and to walk or bike to your neighborhood shop or park by making it safer and more convenient. And supporting a future-ready workforce means supporting training in green economy jobs, engineering, construction, et cetera. As I mentioned, we are working on an environmental impact report required by the California Environmental Quality Act for these documents that analyzes the broad impact of the proposed policies. We did a notice of preparation for that back in the fall of 2023. And once that comes out, there'll be a mandatory 45-day comment period with that document. We're also excited to get started on a zoning code update. Any significant zoning code update is kind of a lengthy process, so we're proposing breaking up into 3 phases so that we can address some priority fixes in the short term even before we adopt the new general plan. And then once we do adopt the general plan, we want to make sure there's at least a base level of compliance between the general plan and the current zoning code so that we can continue to work smoothly while we work on a whole new zoning code, which will hopefully be easier to use and understand by the public, staff, everyone, and that facilitates the kind of development the community wants to see. A resolution to enter into an agreement with a selected consultant for that is moving forward to council on June 17th. And looking ahead, this month, in addition to those things, we're still working on the draft general plan, which will release in late July. And we'll have a 30-day comment period with that and continue general plan engagement and CAP engagement over the summer. We're tentatively planning a CAP online workshop the end of July, and we'll have more specific events for the general plan once we know when exactly that'll be released. But these will include at least major public workshops, online events, and other tools to make sure we can reach people across the city at different levels they want to engage. We're also going to get started on the zoning code update, perhaps with another joint session with these bodies to think about visioning for that process. And once we do that initial round of engagement on the draft general plan and revise it, we'll release the second draft of that, the environmental impact report, and the climate action plan, which will trigger the 45-day comment period. And it's only after all that and after we revise the documents that we can think about the formal approval process targeted for later this year. So thank you for sticking with me throughout this presentation. Just a couple reminders in closing. We started general plan engagement back in 2021, but the document also draws from significant community work put into efforts like the economic development and Visión Salinas plans. It's a refresh of the community's vision after 20 plus years. It aligns with updated priorities, including those in the council strategic plan, and addresses compliance with state laws. We're looking forward to all getting the chance to review the draft once it's released and taking the next step forward on this project.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. We're going to go ahead and have Larissa put the planning commissioners through the paces first and see if they have any questions.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from the planning commissioners? Commissioner Gutierrez?
No questions, no comment.
Commissioner Almanza Larios?
No questions.
Commissioner Meeks?
No questions, no comments.
Commissioner Ruck?
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Purnell?
Uh-oh, I do have questions, sorry. So, I had a question about slide 14, the AMBAG forecast population growth projections. I was just curious about the data source. Obviously, like my lens represents schools, so we've had significant declining enrollment, so we actually haven't seen an uptick in population increase. So I was just curious where those numbers came from.
I think they do a significant amount of modeling with those. I'd have to check with them on specific data things, but I mean, census, all the usual things on projects. And with those projections, they have been getting flatter and flatter. So every time they release a new one, it flattens out more as looks at demographics and things like that. I think one of the reasons we're still thinking of the upward trajectory is the addition of new housing and growth. But it's much less compared to even like the previous general plan population projections, which were like 190,000, or I think in 2002 over 200,000. So it does keep flattening out.
Because I was just curious if it was broken down potentially by age demographic, right? So if there's a decline in 18 under school age enrollment, that might mean to rethink how we look at housing, right? If that population that's coming in is older based on age or something.
Yeah, and even some of their, like they project out and they do for all season categories, and they look at even the amount of people per household. And because of demographics and stuff, overcrowding is slightly improving just because of those things like you mentioned, that
Yeah.
people having less kids, families are getting smaller, so.
And then my last question was about the distribution of land use designation. So is there a required or mandated like zoning ratios? Like if we have so much of the city allotted for housing, only a small percentage is for parks and green space, right? So quality of life implications, is there a standard that people tend to follow in terms of designation distribution?
Yeah, and in the open space element, it talks a little about those park standards, and I think we're a little off, though. I'm not sure if Monica remembers off the top of her head. I think it's like 3 acres per 1,000. Yeah. We're not quite there, so it is important to add green space to get up to those, but those opportunities are sometimes limited, and we do have a backlog of maintenance and other things for our existing parks. So I don't know if we'll hit the perfect ratio, but we can definitely look at places that need it the most and try to encourage more things there. That answered your question or not?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions, Commissioner Rockamora?
Yes, we talked about the general plan that was started over 10 years ago, and now we're talking about it. We readdressed it in 2021. What have we done?
So the economic development element, which kind of came out of the efforts after the Great Recession, that document kind of envisioned itself as a platform for a general plan update. There have been changes stuff since then, and as far as the season, some of those 30-odd plans are kind of what they did. So leading up to, so after this EDE adopted in 2014, that's the over 10 years ago part, it took a while. They got the environmental piece done for that. It took 3 years. That was 2017. And during that time, too, we launched a lot of these community planning efforts. So focused on different neighborhoods, Alisal, Chinatown. The Parks, Rec, and Libraries Master Plan was citywide, but it was topic focused. So those things kind of led into this general plan update, which was supposed to get kickstarted even sooner than 2021, 2020. There's a slight major event that happened in 2020 that kind of slowed things down too. So it has been a long road. It's been a bit of a slow road, but the city has been doing lots of different community planning efforts as it makes its way towards this general plan update.
Okay, my question is, I'm asking for is, the city has a problem with rental control, and in the late 1990s, there was a housing boom. Okay, we haven't built nothing here in Salinas.
Yeah.
What's the holdup on this? We talk about the general plan, we projected, we talk about getting together and talking about it. Why is other cities doing, building and growing, and we're not?
That's a great question. And There are a couple answers. One, the city did anticipate growing a lot after 2002. It went forward and annexed the future growth area for those new neighborhoods, and then that financial crisis hit. So the future growth area, the central and west area stuff we're talking about now, was supposed to happen a long time ago. Obviously didn't, and that's kind of a danger of putting all your eggs in one basket. So some of the land use designation changes and even state efforts like the rise in accessory dwelling units are kind of about spreading some of that risk out. As we said, okay, we're going to build all these new houses, they're going to go up here, but then we had a recession.
Okay,
And that
so
killed it.
with your accessory dwelling units, just talking with some architects and contractors, why is there a delay? Why does it take so long to get permits? You guys, and I know Lisa could probably answer this. We have so many applications out there, but only so many are approved. Is that our inspectors? We don't have enough inspectors? If we don't, we need to really concentrate on getting more inspectors out there and getting this moving to provide more housing for people. It'll bring down the costs.
So I don't think that there's one single response to your question. I think it's a combination of factors. So before you were talking about why aren't we building housing? And I would say Jonathan was correct in indicating the fluctuations in the market, the delay in the adoption of the specific plans. At this point in time, we're past that, and we've received tentative map applications for over 5,400 homes. Just last summer, we approved our first tentative map in the central area, and it was for over 1,600 units, so they are coming. Going to the permitting side, I would say that in 23-24, when I became director, I brought on a consultant working with Human Resources to do an assessment of the community development department, and we started with permit services. And the first comment that was received that for a city of our size, with the volume of permits and applications that are coming through, we are understaffed. And so slowly over time, we have been adjusting staffing, we've been building our staff, adjusting workflows to streamline and have better coordination. And I would say that the next big step for us is the zoning code. Because staff, when they're processing applications, they're following code, be it zoning code, building code, fire code. And so how we define and translate, educate the community as to what those requirements are is a big step. How clearly it's explained to the community, as well as how well staff are able to interpret. So there's not subjectivity, and it's very objective. So those are things that we're doing to improve and streamline the permitting process.
Okay, so you're saying understaffed, what are we doing about that, being understaffed in the permitting process? Because I look at it as when you go to permitting, you guys are making money from that, and it brings in income to the city where we're short of money, we're going to places, but if we could start streamlining the permitting process, more money will be coming in.
That is correct. And that's what
Okay.
we're working towards as we fill vacant positions and increase staff capacity.
Okay, so like I say, my question is, what are we doing about, changing the permitting process of hiring people? Because if you get the right people in the right place, I'm a businessman, I look at that, you need the people. If you're understaffed, let's get people there and let's move it.
And that's in process. So we have just hired a new plan check, a plan checker 1 to help with processing, and we're going to be, through the budget process, adding positions in permit services to increase that capacity, not only for intake, but for plan review. And ultimately, when we have the future growth area applications coming to the building permit side, we will need the inspectors.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a couple questions. On the slide 4, you mentioned AB 821, 2023 general plan consistency. And then in your comment, you said in connection to the zoning code. And can you just explain that?
Yeah, so in the past, when you have a general plan amendment or major general plan change, there's been a little bit of leeway on when you have to update your zoning code by. And if you're making minor changes and stuff, this, may not be that big of an issue, but we're doing major changes. We want to make sure they're close together, and now there are requirements that if we adopt a new general plan and it's inconsistent with the zoning code in some place, like, for example, some place might allow in the general plan more housing. The recent laws where someone can file an application and give us 6 months to correct the zoning code or process the application based on the general plan. We want to avoid more confusing processes like that and like some of the things we've been going through with other state laws. So it's important to be able to update the zoning code kind of in tandem with the end of the general plan update to make sure that it can implement that without a lot of confusion.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering when you mentioned the EDE on the slide number 7, it says optional element. Why is it optional? What does that mean?
It's not one of the required elements under state law.
Oh, under state law?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so I had another question on that. So then, with the EDE, I know there's some study sessions. But I guess my question is more so when you said you're trying to streamline it, what is the goal behind that? Like,
So the goal,
why would it need to be streamlined?
well, one, because we're updating kind of all the other elements. So when they did the EDE itself, it kind of made itself a mini general plan update, so it didn't want to touch the 2002 plan too much. It kind of said, we'll take on all these topics that we think are related to economic development, and it's, we're just going to do it here. So it in itself is, again, 400+ goals, action, policies. Many of those actions have many bullet points. So it's kind of a big bear of a document. It's kind of on its own, and this is an opportunity to kind of elevate some of those key policies into required elements. And to, when I say streamline it a bit, I do mean streamline it a bit, and like make sure we're carrying forward priorities. But it's been proven to be very hard for staff to sometimes implement and move priorities forward just because it's so big. And if we do this separate batch of general plan updates, we're almost having kind of 3 different things. We'll have like an updated general plan, a housing element, and economic development that aren't quite the same. They all have to be consistent and talk to each other. So it's just easier, hopefully for the community to have it in kind of, as much as possible, one place. So it's all going to look and feel the same, be in the one document, and still have less priorities elevated, but also a chance to kind of look back and look at some of the things that maybe, since much of the content was done 2014 or below, to take out some of the things that have been accomplished, or some of the priorities have changed or just need to be updated. So it's a chance to do that too.
So I did have a chance to read through it, and I liked the document. My question is going to be along the lines of, so you said it's for the community to understand it, or for staff to understand it, or maneuver it, whatever it is, the topic that they're looking for. But what I liked about it was that it did have kind of a map of how to get it done. And so I'm wondering, well, when you move it around from what you just described into different areas, are those details going to be preserved? Or are you wanting to just simplify it so anybody can understand it? I almost feel like that would be, detrimental to our process of getting things done. And definitely there's been things that have been accomplished, and, to the tune of that was part of what helped us to move forward to get those things done. I like the style of it, even in effect that, can we do that more extensively in other areas of our general plan? So I was, kind of concerned about that, why it's considered optional. Is if it's incorporated, are we going to continue to keep that detail?
I mean, I would say the actual general plan, this revised version, is kind of written closer to that style than the previous general plan. So it is goal, policies, actions, like the EDE, and every chapter has an implementation matrix that kind of lines out those goals, policies, actions, and time frame, responsible department. So it does follow more of that style. I'll let Lisa step.
I think I got distracted with that extra comment, so if you could repeat your question, please.
It was more about, because he had mentioned they were trying to make it more understandable or easier for the staff to maneuver.
So I think it's twofold. One, it's ensuring consistency across the general plan. So the economic development element, when it was developed, was a mini general plan covering topics that extend beyond traditional economic development topics. However, it was envisioned at that time that economic development does mean healthy neighborhoods, does include, the sound infrastructure, circulation, and all of workforce and all of those components. So it wrapped together many different topics. And as we're moving forward into our general plan, we are wanting to avoid duplication and inconsistencies between the elements. So we are recommending that we push those elements that are related to quality of life, health, into our new environmental justice or open space or public safety or community design elements so that they are within their topic area. In terms of the level of detail, one thing to keep in mind with a general plan is if you deviate from what is written in the plan in terms of a specific goal, policy, or action, you need to amend the plan in order to go forward. You need to, as projects and programs come forward for implementation, they have to demonstrate substantial consistency across the general plan. So by removing some of the granular details and putting them in what we could call a work plan or a strategic plan that maintains that level of detail and provides the roadmap for general plan implementation is a recommended approach.
Okay,
So not to lose it, but
Okay,
just to house it in a different document.
Okay, so then, in the overall planning, is there a section for accountability? Like how do we, you're saying there's timelines and things, but is there a process that is, I may just not know that it's in there already, but I'm asking the question. Is there somewhere for, how do we make sure that we're, as a community, moving forward with the things that, we've planned on and that we can continue to move forward with those?
So on an annual basis, the state does require a general plan annual report as well as a housing element annual report to track our progress on implementation. There is no specific format for that, so it's self-reporting as to where we are, but that is really the opportunity for staff to communicate to council and the public the progress across the general plan as well as in the arena of housing.
Okay, so then it would be the council's responsibility to hold staff accountable at that point?
Correct, and we
Okay.
have deadlines, so that has to be submitted by April 1st of every year. So it will come to, housing element tends to come to planning commission as well, and then we go to city council in March.
And then one last question, steering committee, why have we not been hosting those, and are we going to be resuming soon?
So yes, so we were in that period of drafting. So we went through the whole community engagement effort, walked through all the elements with the steering committee, received the feedback, had draft goals, policies, and actions, and then the work began of writing the elements and providing the meat to the bones of the goals, policies, and actions. And the public review draft period will be that opportunity to reconnect with the community and see it in a full form. And I just have to take a moment while I have the microphone here to recognize staff, because we are preparing this document in-house. So it is staff, John, Monica, Grant, as well as all the other representatives from city departments that are working with the community to actually write these elements, draft the goals, policies, and actions. In most cases, usually that's contracted out to consultants, but we felt, given all the planning that we had done over the last 10 years, we knew staff, the community, and it would be easier or better for us to do the draft, and we're only relying on consultants for the technical assistance of the Climate Action Plan and Environmental Impact Report and some of the graphic and formatting. So I do want to take a moment to recognize staff.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Ruck, did you have a question?
Yes, actually, I have a couple of questions. I don't see a really good relationship between the Climate Action Plan and parks. Green spaces are those spaces that help reduce your climate changes and the catastrophes that come from it. I see trees being buzzsaw throughout the city and none being planted. I don't see a lot of new parks, and we don't have enough park space or walkability spaces in this city. And in one place, which I read, it says, new parks if possible. That if possible sort of just threw me, because here we are talking climate action, if possible, here we are talking health and community health, if possible. I don't think that term should be in there, if possible. It's got to be out in the forefront because it helps the health of a community. It helps with climate change. There are many things that our parks and walkability spaces help with. Also, sometimes getting bicycles off the roads and onto trails so they don't have that conflict with cars. So I know the general plan has certain elements that state law says you shall have, but I'd like to see a lot of cross-referencing to booster that, okay? Something else I'd like to get in the weeds about, if I may, Madam Chair. Is it a question? It's a question. It's a question, but it's in the weeds. This is a question, too, about the trees and the climate. Can you do that? That was a question. Cost, I keep hearing about cost of housing. You cannot build a house for $300 a square foot. You have a 1,500 square foot house that is $450,000. You have a 200 square foot house that is $600,000. Is that slowing down, because our community cannot afford that, is that slowing down the building that's going on or not going on here in our community?
Absolutely. I mean, rising costs are certainly not going to help make housing any cheaper to build. When they do build the new houses, it's probably going to be the filtering of older units to become the naturally occurring, more affordable housing. Otherwise, we're still competing for the same small pool of houses that exists today. But yeah, rising costs, extended timelines, those are all going to add to the overall cost of the house that has to get passed on to the buyer at some point. And just on the trees, 100% on everything you just said. I know the CAP team is looking at sequestration and some of that nexus with the trees, and I think we just did an urban forest master plan, and kind of looking at the relationship with that. I don't know a lot of details about that. I know I do also get concerned when I go around and I see street trees being cut down and not being replaced. So that is also something that hits me in the heart too.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Those are all the questions from the commissioners. Oh,
It's a quick question.
yes, go ahead.
You know, she mentioned the school enrollment in planning, house planning. Did you also take into consideration birth rate
Yeah,
in the
so
city?
birth rate, death rate, a lot of those projections we'll look at, and I'm not AMBAG's demographer, but they do have a demographer, so they have like professionals involved in that. We got birth rate, death rate, migration in and out, age cohorts, projected growth. So they look at a bunch of different factors with that. So it's not just a plotting out a population based on the last 10 years thing. It's a pretty detailed exercise. And we usually go through, because they do it regionally, and they come up with a number regionally, and they have to kind of play a cup game and divvy it out to all the cities. And we're like, hey, we're planning this future growth area. We think we might have a little more, but like, these guys are growing faster than you in the last 10 years, so they're getting more of this pie. But yeah, it's a kind of process, and they do update it pretty frequently.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. We will now go to council. Councilmember D'Arrigo, you ready to roll?
Questions only.
Questions only.
Okay. I have a question on the, I understand there's 3 pillars and 8 elements that are required. And according to the presentation on page 3 in our packet, it says that our vision of 2040 also includes community design element, which is optional, economic development element, and arts, culture, and youth. I don't see that in the chart. I'm not sure if that's still an element that we're adding into our grid?
Page 4 of the report.
Maybe I missed it, I don't see it there, but is that something we're still, that's one of our elements that we're supporting?
Yep.
Okay, and then the last one was public safety, which I see as optional, so that answers that question, and I'm happy to see that the public safety one is added, and the optional ones I think are great, and are those going to become permanent instead of like optional? Okay.
And they're optional, but they're part of the general plan going forward. Like the community design element is actually a part of the 2002 general plan. That's when that was added, and we're just updating that this time. And public safety, well, as I mentioned, safety elements kind of traditionally are more like environmental hazards. Our current one does have a little bit on like SEPTED and some of the other CASP kind of work, the Community Alliance for Safety work. We kind of just split those topics. We know there's enough interest in that public safety side of things to make its own element. So that's kind of where that came from in the split with the more environmental hazards in the other safety element.
Okay, and then my other question, Jonathan, is in regards to the timeline that you mentioned for 2025, July, August. I mean, obviously, we have a very aggressive timeline between now and the end of the year to accomplish a lot, which is a concern. We're going to be very busy, obviously, but in July through August, you mentioned start the zoning code update, which I think is critical. What does that look like as far as you're concerned? Like, what is that process?
I think it's going to be an evolving process with the council, planning commission, and leadership. I know we want to include everyone from the start. So, Lisa.
Step one will be for the city council to consider the authorization to execute a contract with the selected consultant. The first step with the consultant as we kick off our work with them will be to develop a community engagement plan, which we will be working with you on, and that will chart our process for establishing an advisory committee, stakeholder groups, how we're going to conduct our outreach, and make sure we're identifying stakeholders that need to be included in the process. And then we would follow phase one, which John referenced, is making sure we have several things identified in our housing element that we need to become consistent with, as well as there's some low-hanging fruit. We were talking earlier about streamlining. So we already have our little list of items that we would like to course correct through a zoning code amendment to help streamline processes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Gloria?
Jonathan, well, more on the community engagement, kind of Lisa highlighted it, bringing in that community engagement piece. And I also see some stakeholders here. I see Mr. Casavan and Suba here. So you're working with them right now, correct?
On the
With
general
these
plan side.
stakeholders? Well, for Lisa?
Yes, are you referring to the general plan update?
Yeah.
Yes, so we have throughout the general plan process and past plans, we've been engaging the community, and we continue to do so. And in this last leg, we are having really focused engagement with economic development stakeholders to refine what is our economic development element and identify the priorities.
Good. And that's great.
Yes,
I like that.
it's been a committed group, and we've met 5 times to date. I'm sure after this study session, we'll be resetting our meetings to be able to finalize an economic development element to come out in the draft.
Yes, okay. That's my only question.
Aurelio?
Get this microphone back on. I'm going to go back to something I heard in the presentation. So I did hear that there's about 1,600 units coming. I'm going to have a follow-up question on that one. Do we know when that will begin, and how long will it take for those units to be available?
So at this point in time, they are working on finalizing the final map. So they have submitted the applications that are required in terms of the subdivision improvements to be able to finalize the come forward for approval of a final map, and then that would be recorded. We are working closely with the developer to identify the process for when they are ready to submit their applications for model homes. So that will be a next step as they're wrapping up the final map and submitting then their parcel maps. So we're anticipating in the next few months receiving the model home applications. So that is definitely moving forward.
Okay, I think as a majority of us know, that the city of Salinas makes up, the workforce in agriculture and hospitality. Has your team, or, have you or your team had the opportunity to speak with some of our other cities or larger cities along the peninsula regarding like their circulation, right? Because circulation is something very important to me, seeing it every day. Being a Salinas resident, like driving over to the peninsula, you see hundreds of cars going in one direction, and then coming this way, it's probably a couple dozen, right? So when it comes to circulation, right, as we're developing our general plan, have we had the opportunity to take a look at theirs, even if it's the draft, so that we have that understanding of what they're anticipating in terms of circulation? And have we also looked at those other cities in terms of their housing, right? So if some of those other general plans from those peninsula cities, if they're thinking, oh, we're just gonna build a couple of hundred, that may end up having a negative impact on us, having to take on the brunt of like, oh, well, because so few were built on that side or plans to be built on that side, that the burden now falls on the city of Salinas. So have we had that opportunity yet to cross-reference and look at like circulation and housing?
Yeah, and I would say my wife is also a Salinas resident who commutes to the peninsula every day, so she knows that pain of seeing the 55-minute traffic in one direction and 27-minute traffic in the other direction.
Exactly.
And it is fundamentally a housing jobs imbalance. We're kind of a bedroom community for the peninsula, and this was a big point of discussion during the last housing element cycle when we were talking about the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. That's when the state says, okay, this broad area, the greater Monterey area has to build this number of units, and we're going to apportion them out. And at the start of that process, they actually said, okay, in the next 8 years, you have to build 9,000 units, which is wild. We, through the process, argued for equity and all of those reasons, jobs, housing imbalance, to get that to a more manageable for this cycle, 6,000 odd units. But it's been an ongoing conversation, and we definitely know that imbalance exists, we experience it, and we're definitely working with our partners and other friends to talk about transportation issues as well as ongoing housing issues. So it's an ongoing regional conversation.
Okay. And then last question, once we have approval of our next general plan, in terms of being able to make those amendments, if you could refresh my memory, would the city be able to amend it? Is it annually? Is it once or twice a year, once it's been approved?
It's 4 times a year.
It's
General
4
plan can
times a
be
year.
amended
Okay.
4 times a year.
And I just want to make sure I remember this correctly. So amendments would be able to happen 4 times a year, not 4 amendments, but it could be on like the
Groups of
planning commission's
amendments.
agenda. You could have like 3 different types of amendments, but we would be limited to only being able to make those at 4 meetings with like almost like an unlimited amount per year. Okay,
That is correct.
thank you.
Okay. Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go deep into the weeds of the administrative draft plan, goals, policies, and actions, starting off with the action for LU 1.4.3, which is selectively increase supply of land outside of existing city limits for economic and housing development by expanding the sphere of influence to include target areas and by exploring future annexation as projects come forward. When we refer to slide number 25, which has, I guess, the most comprehensive map of the city at this time, is the proposed kind of annexation area, what staff has identified as meeting those conditions?
Yeah, and in the full draft, there'll be some additional maps that'll help add context to that. But, so in the 2002 general plan, there was future growth areas, and we kind of annexed the big one we want to go for pretty quickly. And in the economic development element, it added some target areas, some of which are in alignment, some of which are not aligned with the MOU with the county for the direction of growth. So we've kind of taken the approach that we will consider annexation of these areas if specific projects come forward for them. But yeah, those areas in gray, and it might be hard to see in the map provided in that, outside the city boundaries are those in the sphere of influence, or actually the sphere of influence is on there as well. So one of those steps would be working with LAFCO to expand the sphere of influence and annex them. But there will be additional maps to kind of make that a little more clear in the draft plan.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Moving on to the next action item, just a quick question. It says use the place types to increase flexibility in the zoning code to, quote, accommodate innovative economic development activity.
Mm-hmm.
What are we envisioning as innovative economic development activity? Just because the word innovative in and of itself just implies that it's going to be more just tech-driven economic development?
I don't think it's just tech-driven. I think that's an aspect of it, but I think we're kind of leaving innovation to the market and to the community, and just being open to new things and make it flexible so we don't quash too many things just because it doesn't fit a predetermined use or some combination. Certain codes had to add a bunch of things for like cell phone stores when they came along. I don't know if we'll see another use like that again, but rather just be able to say like, okay, yes, that's cool, that's new, let's do it.
Okay, thank you. And then would you mind providing some clarification, action item LU 1.3.7? I'm familiar with what our economic opportunity areas are. That's like area K and those ones, right? The alphabet. What are the economic reserve areas? I think this is the first time I've ever seen what that is.
So those were in the economic development element 2, and again, there'll be another map of those. So I added, and Lisa, and I'm sure even members of the audience can provide more context on this, but they started as just economic opportunity areas, and some of them were big areas outside the city that got refined to target areas. And even in the ED process, they didn't assign build-out numbers. They said that, okay, we're going to kind of color these things in, but we don't think there's going to be growth here for the horizon of this general plan update. We think there might be in these smaller target areas. So this is kind of saying don't pursue growth into the bigger areas until we are more actively doing it in these defined target areas first.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Moving on to action item number 1.1.9. And again, just to read it for everyone. Continue to require new development to contribute to the financing of street improvements, quote, including formation of roadway maintenance assessment districts, end quote. And then it carries on a little bit more. Can you elaborate more on what a roadway maintenance assessment district is, as opposed to what an HOA would provide or a commercial district like Salinas City Center would provide? What exactly is this for? Additional maintenance for the actual structural integrity of the road, or is it just for beautification of the street?
And so what's the action number again?
I'm sorry? Action C-1.1.9.
Okay, that's where I was, 1.1.9. Yeah, so I think when you have something like the future growth area, they do a bunch of assessment districts for parks, for roads. So it's a little bit different, I think, of a funding mechanism than just the development impact fees for the roads and stuff inside the city. I'd have to talk to Lisa or our public works director about how the exact mechanics of that work, but it's a little bit different funding mechanism, I think, than our average city streets.
Can I get just a little bit more color to that?
Roadway maintenance assessment districts. It's probably from the existing.
It's similar to a lighting and landscape maintenance district, where it's identifying a specific area, and then, yes, it would, any funds collected through assessment would go towards improvement of those roads. So it's more the infrastructure than beautification, to answer your question.
Okay, more on the infrastructure. And is it a similar process, like with establishing any
It
other
would be a
assessment
Prop 218 process, yes.
process? Okay, thank you for that clarification. Moving on down to action C, still on the Cs, 1.1.12, which is about data sharing with developing markets, including smart city and connected autonomous vehicle platforms. Can you elaborate more? Again, this is my first time hearing of us doing any data sharing with any other third-party provider.
Markets including smart city vehicles. You have me stumped a moment. It's this one.
The latter part says, and expand data sharing. So expanding implies we're already, to an extent, doing some data sharing with some of these providers.
That's it.
This is Public Works. I don't know if we have a representative from Public Works, because we worked with all departments. We ourselves did not generate all the goals, policies, and actions.
Is there a specific, is there concern about the data sharing, or just, it might,
Just wanted more information on it. Like I said, this is the first time I'm hearing that we do any data sharing with any third-party
We can
provider.
definitely provide clarification.
Yeah, if I could get some more clarification on that.
I think it's somewhat, it could be related to, I think the concept's kind of died down a little bit now, but a few years ago, so smart city stuff was kind of all the rage, and connecting it with not just self-driving things, but stuff looking at monitoring for congestion, or maybe even monitoring the condition of roadways through other means than like going out and doing an assessment. So it might be related to those kind of initiatives.
So it's got a lot to do with that, as well as when you look at technology. There's an example, for example, is that some of the discussion on 68, where you're going to be using cameras and other things to control the signals. Because as you know, there are certain times during the day where the traffic is east to west and then west to east. So some of the traffic lights, they can talk to each other, so it's a lot of that. So you can sort of, so our traffic lights can connect with each other. You can connect to the broadband internet. You can also be able to identify issues that occur before they occur based on some of the metrics and some of what the automation is seeing. There's a lot of use of AI to do this. So part of it is, if you know what we have today, we have our camera systems, and we're actually looking at what's happening on real time during a peak season, but we have to respond as a person. So eliminating that and having so much more quick responses is just connecting everything. So when you're looking at technology, I know Councilmember Sandoval has talked about some of what's going on Highway 68 and looking at how we can manage the traffic better. So it's a lot of that. It's just automating, looking at our broadband, looking at our, do we have a dark fiber network that can help us facilitate movement of traffic? So it's just, just better use of technology.
It could be written in a probably more plain language way.
But if you go in other cities, for example, they're using, like I was just in Arizona, where they automate self-driving cars, right? But so cities are limiting it to certain times and certain peak periods. So like, for example, you fly into the airport, if you've flown into some of the airports, they won't let you use the automated car during peak times because they're not quite there yet. They'll let you use it at 3 in the morning when there's only one flight coming. So it's a lot of that kind of conversation as well.
Awesome, thank you for that clarification. Continuing on to the circulation element further down, this now at the policy goal level. Policy C 3.3, promote appropriate capacity and traffic flow on city streets. Again, in relation to slide number 25 and the kind of the circulation of the city, is there a particular reason why we omitted the eastern bypass in terms of circulation? Because regardless of our goal to reduce vehicle miles traveled, regardless of our goals to try to get people to do more active transportation, we know there's still going to be cars on our roads, and traffic congestion is what it is as it stands. And I don't think it's going to take a traffic engineer to tell us we have really bad congestion in the city of Salinas. I think all of us have the lived experience of trying to get from East Salinas to North Salinas to South Salinas. There's that issue of circulation. Is there still the possibility of including the eastern bypass in this general plan update so it continues to live into the future and potentially?
There are a couple of obstacles there. One is with SB 743, forgetting the name, but basically there was a major piece of legislation which changed the metric of how we look at circulation impacts from level of surface or congestion to vehicle miles traveled. So, and once this adding major new roadways and stuff is seen to really increase VMT, there'd be a major cost associated with trying to mitigate that, as well as when you look at the city's overall infrastructure needs and costs. Eastern bypass, western bypass, you're talking billions of dollars, not attached to any development. So it's just the city kind of on the hook for that. So environmental feasibility, fiscal feasibility, that's why we took them out. They also don't help us meet those other VMT and cap goals. Do know that congestion is a big frustration, so we're trying to look at it as other ways of reducing congestion, managing that, but recognizing there are other priorities and goals of the circulation system, providing access, providing safe routes for all users. So if the be-all and all is just moving cars fast, it can't reach some of those, and it's going to be increasingly hard just to build new spaces for cars, especially stuff out of the city, because there's also, those bypasses weren't in current city limits. You have to work with the county or get and annex the land, do the building, et cetera. So, these are all ultimately the council's decisions. They can go back and look at them, but it would add a lot of costs and things back into the equation.
You mentioned that a major consideration for removing it was that it's not tied to any development. Why was it included in the 2002 general plan then?
I think those general plans were just generally more bullish on building our way out of things. Cities were probably in a little bit better place financially. Obviously, at the federal level, priorities have shifted pretty rapidly and stuff, so maybe there's a window where they're interested in that again, but even just the amount of funding has kind of gone down. So if you could do a new road and could go out and get a big federal grant for it, that certainly would help make it possible, but it is a big financial cost and project to the city. For example, we're still trying to fund and complete the Baranda Road expansion, and that's taken a long time and a lot of money. So I can't imagine what a bypass, even if it's surface level or interstate, would cost around the city.
But doesn't that kind of prove the point if something like Baranda alone, which is not a bypass, took that long, shouldn't we probably start that process today if we're going to work towards that?
Well, you started in 2002, and
So if I can intercede here, I think if that's something you want us to consider, the whole point of this is to get the feedback. But recognize, Commissioner also talked about why does it take so long to do these projects? So there's a cost to this. So cities do financial districts, they do impact fees, they do all of that. So all of that's going to can really influence how fast or how slow we grow. So if this is something you want us to look at, absolutely let us and we'll factor it in. But when we're trying to answer, and the whole conversation about, building in the peninsula in here. So if you take the peninsula away, everything we've heard from everything that is housing here, irrespective of what's going on in the peninsula, we have 6,000 units to build to meet our RHNA numbers roughly. So how do we get there? And part of that is a huge cost of infrastructure, and part of it's also parking. We're going to have this conversation about how do we park, how do we move traffic around and still build the houses we need, and how do we finance it? And part of the funding is assessment districts, is impact fees. All of that goes into the price of a house. So the other conversation about $400,000, $400 a square foot, $500 a square foot, that all feeds into that cost. So part of it is if you want us to look at that, we will look at that and bring back some options, but we have to plan for the future. And as we're building, we're going to have to allocate some of those costs to our building, or else we're never going to get there. And so yes, it'll take a long time, but we have to start allocating those costs. And in allocating those costs, we're going to influence the cost, the ultimate cost of that house. So that's part of the trade-offs we have to have a conversation with the council and the planning commission, is what's the balance? And can we move circulation around with technology and not more streets? That's all part of the conversation. And so I think today is important to get your feedback and what you want us to look at, then we'll sort of bring it back. So I think that's something that if you want us to look at, absolutely we'll look at it. But there is a cost to it, and there is a significant cost to it.
Yeah. I think it's still not a project worth exploring, so long as we have like a cost-benefit analysis, right? Of if we do pursue more the route of rebuilding the actual existing built environment and using and leveraging technology to address that, how much of an impact are we realistically going to be able to make just with those two alone? Whereas, what difference could we make if we actually do a physical large-scale improvement like an Eastern Bypass? I think would be my request. Moving on to the environmental justice element, or HEJ, 4.2.1, which is establish just cause eviction and anti-harassment ordinance. Just given the state and the direction of the council, I think it's appropriate to omit that or eliminate that.
Okay.
And those are all my questions, sir.
Councilmember Burr.
Thank you. How you doing, Mr. Moore?
Doing great.
And I want to concur what Ms. Brinton said. I want to thank all her staff. This is not an easy task, and then you have to listen to all of us. That's another task in itself. But let me ask you something. Ms. Brinton, Mr. Moore had mentioned you have had 4 or 5 meetings already with Spark, if I, you know, the stakeholders that have been around since 2017. How consistent have we, am I right?
Longer than that. But
Excuse me?
Sparks have been around longer than that, 2012 or 13. I'm sure they'll give me the exact date when they speak up.
Yeah, so Mr. Moore, how consistent, because what I'm learning today, it seems like if we have new staff or a new council, things start changing. And even though things were adopted, things were approved, and I believe in 2017, Mayor Donahue was the mayor, if I'm correct. Is that true?
Mayor Gunter.
Mayor Gunter. But Councilmember De La Rosa was here as well. So this was approved. So how consistent are we from that time, from that council? Because you mentioned in your report, you reviewed goals, policies, and actions. Back then, there were also those. Are these part of these goals and actions, items that you're talking about that were implemented back then?
Yeah, and this general plan update is not whole cloth. So there's a lot of still of the 2002 general plan move forward in this as well. There's a lot of the EDE, and there's a lot of things like the AVP and other community planning documents. So council has certainly changed and shift over the years. You roll with that. You go one way, you go the other. But you do try to keep some things consistent, and the general plan does help with that. I think there is significant carryover from 2002 to now, 2017 to now.
Yeah. And and I know state laws changed, federal laws changed, but I'm a neighborhood politician. I want to discuss in this general plan, what is it that we can do, be consistent, and to move on with whatever was approved, because there was a lot of work. I think there was hundreds of hours that people had put into this thing. Ms. Brinton, let me ask you something because we need to support your department, and I know we can't compete with private industry, but, and I'm going to look to the city manager as well, because he'll jump in if I'm going overboard here. But let me ask you something. How is it that this council can support you? Because I can imagine if you lose one of your staff or even 2 staff members, some things will be at a standstill. I think, because I don't know your department, but then all of a sudden, people are waiting, and your department brings investment to this city. So what is it, whether you're short-staffed, is it, when we talk about investment, do we need to pay more? I mean, look at situations where maybe within your department, because you have to be highly skilled in certain areas. Are we competing where we can get enough staff so we can make this thing happen?
So, Councilmember Barrera, we're going to be, as part of the budget adoption or consideration of adoption next Tuesday, we are bringing forward, and we shared with the Finance Committee today, additional staff augmentation that we're recommending be incorporated into the 25-26 budget to be able to support planning and permit services at the levels that we need to, given the volume that we currently have and are anticipating. So I think that is an area to support.
Yes. Can you be a little bit more specific on that? As for
Well, I hesitate to deviate from what our
No,
topic
I
is, the
understand.
general plan update, and we're really, the purpose of the study session is to receive direction, some feedback on goals, policies, actions that resonate with you, concerns, questions, things that you think we may have missed or just want clarification. So happy to answer your question in much more detail as we bring it forward in the budget.
So to follow up on that, one of the things I can do, since we discussed it with the Finance Committee today, I will make sure you get the report that went to the Finance Committee that details what was presented to the Finance Committee, which details some of the additional positions and some of the questions that have come up. So you can have that.
Yeah.
Then if you can be informed better for the budget discussion next week.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. City Manager, on that, because I think, even though I know we have to be consistent on certain things, but some things go hand in hand. Let me just ask you, because to my point, on major policy themes that your report talks about, park and open space maintenance. We have a jewel, it's called Natividad Creek. But that's a scary park. It is huge. It's beautiful for trails. It's beautiful for bicycle riding. I've been on my horse on that one as well. Probably not. Chief Acosta will probably get me. But what I'm saying, to be able to maintain, you know, we have these serious meetings and we discuss things and we implement things and then we don't go any further. What are we doing within this general plan to look at this major policy theme to really maintain our parks where we can make them safe? Because we do have a lot of green space. We just, so what, are we equipped within the staff in this general plan to be able to do that?
I don't think today, I think that's a conversation we need to have, as you talked about some of the financing, some of those questions about some of the financing things that we have. The general plan sets up a roadmap for that, to look at not only infrastructure and the hard financing, but also ongoing financing.
Yes.
So even the conversation over the bypass of some of the parks, permitting, all of that, the general plan gives us a footprint, a roadmap to do that, to bring other financial vehicles to you. But they're all decisions. Some of them require Prop 218. Some of them, all of them require council action. Some of them require us to reach out to the community, the business community, development community, and some of it's going to impact our residents. So all that conversation needs to come before the council.
Yes, thank you. You know, as I'm looking at some action items here, talking about the Alisal Marketplace, with this general plan, Mr. Moore, are we being consistent again? You know, we have the Alisal Marketplace. We have other areas in our neighborhoods. How effective has these relationships been with these stakeholders? Are we moving? I mean, are we making things happen?
I think it really depends on which areas you're talking about. I know last year we did 3 land use change webinar series. We were talking with the folks in the marketplace. We've made an effort to mail out mailers and different things to those areas that might experience significant land use change. So we know that these things impact things, and we're trying to reach out to those who might be directly impacted. So we did 3 of those meetings last year. With the marketplace, I think there might be some re-engagement has to be happening. It was pretty consistent last year, and then kind of trailed off. One thing we have talked about doing is, with the zoning code update, looking at our policies for legal non-conforming uses. So when a zone land use change happens now, and you're like trying to phase out something, if something's illegal, non-conforming use, it's allowed to continue. But if, for example, a major fire happens, it burns down, they may not be able to rebuild or something. We're looking at ways to make things more flexible so that we do these changes with an eye towards the future, but we're not trying to force anyone to change their business right now. We're cognizant of some of those issues and try to communicate that.
Yeah. And city manager, as you see this, because these projects take a long time, and we are seeing that sometimes whatever city council is present and approves something, the ball gets dropped somewhere. How are we working on it to be, once this council's gone, how are we going to continue to be consistent? There'll be new staff, new council. How do we continue to really make this thing happen?
That's a great question. I mean, part of the general plan, it's so hard to update general plans. They're very expensive propositions to update, and they take a long time. And sometimes you get challenged on your general plan updates legally, and so it takes out longer. And so I think why this general plan is important, and I know we've been talking a lot about the other plans, and does it incorporate the 2017 EDE and other things like that. I'm just going to put this out for consideration. Your general plan needs to define the future path and plan and opportunity for the city. That's what's your consistency. So as councils change, as staffs change, we're always going to go back to the general plan. And so I think that's why it's important to really take a really hard look at updating our general plan, which hasn't been done since 2002. And the city has had a ton of planning efforts, a ton. And look at what's happened to downtown. I mean, it took a while, but it happened. Now we're leaning into the marketplace, the Chinatown. So part of the general plan needs to reflect those plans. That's what your Bible, if I can say that, that's your roadmap. That is your path to the future of the city. And because we haven't updated since 2002, I think we've challenged. We have had challenged. We have inconsistencies. We have to talk about amendments. We have to talk about zoning. We have to talk about conditional use permits. All the things that take time to do, we've had to do. So I think what I'm asking, what I think staff's asking the Planning Commission and City Council is, take the opportunity in your general plan to really drive what you want the vision to be for the next 20, 30 years, because it takes a long time to update plans. And by the way, amendments, that you can do them 4 times, and you can dump a bunch of stuff in a single time. You have to make sure it's consistent. Environmentally, you have to go through all that. So one amendment can take months or longer than a year. So while we like to think it's easy to adjust general plans, they are not. And I would almost guarantee that there's probably going to be some lawsuits or things when you want to do an amendment. So I also think it's important to really reflect your vision for the future. And that's why staff spend a lot of time on how do we incorporate all these incredible plans. Spark, and some of the work that was done was award-winning. Allison Marketplace was award-winning. City of Salinas has done incredible work on plans. They're not really reflected in your general plan to the way they should be. And so let's take advantage of this opportunity. And so we're trying to engage and trying to see what we can bring to the table that you all support. So the short answer to your question is, doing a good job to your general plan will make it easier to realize the vision. As council change or staffs change, or city managers change, or city attorneys change, it gives you a pathway there, because it's so hard to update and it's so hard to amend.
Mr. Mendez, I like what you're saying in continuing this engagement. I mean, I see some people in front of us here that have really been engaged, professionals at different levels. And I know when I first met you, when you came on board, you said you wanted to build a team within your department, and then you wanted to go out there and engage with professionals at different levels. How engaged are we bringing in these because I strongly believe these types of individuals can really make things happen with the collaborative effort with your staff.
I think we're engaging. I mean, I think it's a process we have to work through. I think part of the challenge for staff's perspective is to pause and listen, because we also invest a lot of time in what we present, right? And we also recognize that maybe not everybody's going to agree with what we present. So we have to be willing to listen. We have to be willing to engage. We've had a significant meetings with stakeholders, and we expect to have a lot more. We expect to have a lot more dialogue, a lot more breaking things apart, explaining. If we say something's in there, well, okay, hold us to that and let us prove that it's in there. Does it make sense? Does it work? So I think staff's been engaging a lot. And can we engage more? Absolutely. Are we prepared to engage more? Yes, we are. But the other thing is, as we're moving forward on the 1,600 units that I think are coming, the model homes, as we're moving forward on the marketplace, as we're moving forward as the city potentially acquiring property in Chinatown to develop it, we also need to make sure that our general plan allows us to do that. And so we're working concurrently. So we're going to continue to engage. We want to continue to, the zoning effort by itself is going to be an incredible undertaking. It's going to take on a different light than the general plan is, because now we're getting into kind of the specific nitty-gritty of actually building and development and what's allowed, not allowed. So we think the general plan, which should be an overriding document, is complicated. The zoning is, we're going to get into the real specifics.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to engage, and that's why our director presented that we'll come back to you on the engagement strategy.
Yeah.
You need to define that for us.
Well, we need your help as well to define it. My question, and Mayor, my last question here, as we're improving neighborhoods, because you know what, everything starts, Mr. Moore, everything starts great with beautiful pictures and beautiful neighborhoods, but then when we start really looking at it, sometimes we forget about the maintenance. And I'm not being critical because we're a team here. I don't think nobody out in the community that says, what's Mr. Moore doing? No, they say, Barrera, you're not doing anything. That's what they say. They think you're doing a great job, but they say, Barrera, what are you doing? And I'm looking at the partners that I see in front of us, whether it's the police department, the fire department. In this general plan, because you do bring up maintenance, bicycle routes, you know, I ride my bicycle 3 times a week, and I don't want to be redundant, but my God, you know what? It's dangerous to ride a bicycle in the bicycle lane because there's a lot of debris. What are we going to do in this general plan to be, again, the word's going to be consistent for me. To be consistent in maintenance, to be able to say, if we really want these children to ride their bicycles from home to school, how are we going to look at this through this general plan to make those bicycle lanes not only safe, but at the same time clean, so we won't get a flat tire?
That's great. I think that sounds like we should add maintenance as a component of safety and convenience to our policies. That's pretty easy add. You know, I've talked about we want to make this safe and easy for people to bike someplace, and I'm going to mention that, okay, part of that is maintaining these spaces. As far as actually implementing, that'll probably go into, not going for some public works, street cleaning, considering maintenance in the design and building of these things. But at the high level, absolutely, you can add maintenance to this. And then I think the details will be trickling down to your annual budgets and different things like that.
Mr. Moore, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Sandoval.
Yeah, is there going to be a discussion or a plan to address seawater intrusion as part of addressing our water issues?
So that is mentioned in the conservation and environmental safety element, and it's definitely a regional issue. It's probably one of the biggest, call it environment or climate adaptation or what, it's going to be one of the biggest regional projects we undertake. I think the mayor may have done some work with those groups. I mean, there's the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Authority, who has those separate sustainability plans. So since it's technically outside the city, it's a regional thing. It's not under direct jurisdictional control, but it's something we actually have to be a part of that conversation and solution. So that's another thing that's going to be a big ticket infrastructure project eventually if we actually want to do something about it. So again, that's another place where some of those dollars might go. But yeah, it is in the general plan. It's definitely a priority.
Right, because if I'm not mistaken, it's right on North Davis, seawater.
It's coming through, and so as part of the general plan process, we go through water supply assessments. Those go through the water providers who said there's enough water for a build-out through the general plan horizon year, but we know that's a big threat, so.
And we touched on the Baranda expansion. I know the city's currently building one roundabout, but the other roundabout is being built by the developer. Is that something that's determined in the general plan, or how is that determined? Who's responsible for building out those roundabouts?
I have to defer to Lisa. I know in the general plan, there are things about cost sharings, but I think the specifics go way beyond the general plan level.
So it's really through the environmental impact report and the identified mitigation measures that a developer contribution or impact is determined in terms of their impact to the roadway and then their contribution to improving circulation. So it can be determined by a project. So when a project is being analyzed for environmental review and its environmental impact, typically there will be a traffic analysis that will identify both that project as well as cumulative impact. And typically, especially when you're dealing with traffic and circulation, it's a pretty significant impact. So they identify mitigation measures, which could be installation of a roundabout, traffic signal, paying into the traffic fee ordinance for cumulative, to be cumulative, then to do a larger project that would then address the impact that's been identified in the environmental document.
Okay, great. And one of the issues raised in here from the community was pesticides. So I know it's mentioned as one of the community concerns, but how will that be incorporated in the plan?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and look and see what specific policies we have on that. I know as a city, we're probably kind of limited in what we can do as far as some things that might be regulated above our level, the county, state, and federal. So yeah, so off the top of my head, I apologize, I have to go back through and look and see what specific policies we had in there. I know that is a concern, and we have Monica.
Hi, I was waiting for an opportunity to speak, so thank you. That's actually addressed in the environmental justice element, so it is brought up there. We're a little bit limited in terms of what we can do in that arena. A lot of it does fall on the Ag Commission, but it is definitely mentioned in the EJ element as one of the actions.
So as a council, is that something that, through a letter or through communication, we could push with the Ag Commissioners if we don't have that jurisdiction?
Well, a lot of what's mentioned in the EJ element and in some of our other chapters involves a lot of, collaboration. So I think, again, whether it's staff or council reaching out to these different outside agencies, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, but a lot of it on our end is really working with these different agencies in terms of also what they're doing and how it's really more so on the education piece and how we can really expand on what they're doing and to reach our constituents. But I would say it's more so on the education piece for what staff is doing. But I definitely think that if there's an opportunity for this council to communicate concerns to outside agencies, I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Barrera mentioned something about adding, maybe in the details, the maintenance of some of these projects. Would it be appropriate to add something, or is this more of a budget item to make sure that we're intentional about hiring new staff, for example, for park maintenance, considering like we are about to take on Carr Lake? So is that something that would be in the general plan, or is that something budgetary?
I think it belongs in the budget. You don't want to get that specific in the general plan. But if you put a policy that maintenance is important, then we can speak to that in our update that has to come every year to the council and the community.
Okay, I think that would be a good idea to be more intentional about that. And, thank you, Tony. You mentioned that we're going to kind of define what engagement looks like in some of these updates. So, one of the things that I think the council had been asking for was a planning and permit committee made up of, people from industry, residents, and businesses. Is that something that could be directed as we go forward with the general plan or the approval of the contract? Or,
I have to defer some to Lisa, but because I'm not sure what the purpose of that group would be. If it has a broader purpose, looking at different things, and maybe if it was set up, that could certainly be, at least be a touch point for the zoning code update and significant involvement, but I'm not sure if that's what.
The short answer to your question is yes. We can present when we talk to the engagement, and we can talk about what's the best way of engaging. So.
yeah, okay. And the same thing is going to revolve around our economic development, as far as moving forward with an economic development committee. Okay, those are all my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, thank you. All right, we will go ahead and go out to public comment. I'm going to, we'll go ahead and maintain 2 minutes, though I'm going to ask, just so because I know we'll come back with comments, ask that you stay as close to 90 seconds as possible, but you have 2 minutes. And with that, we are open for public comment.
Honorable Mayor Donahue, City Council members, Planning Commissioners, City Manager Mendez, City Attorney Callahan. Good evening, I'm Peter Cassavan. I am the president of Cassavan Architects, which was founded in Salinas in 1949. I'm also the president of Salinas Planning and Research Corporation. And based on Spark's success in unifying the soccer community behind a project that became the Salinas Regional Soccer Complex, City Manager Ray Corpus asked us to engage the community for a vision for an economic development element for the general plan. The EDE was a product of community outreach that was unprecedented in its scale and authentic engagement with the entire community. Hundreds of people donated thousands of hours to the EDE. It received wide support and acclaim. The night it was approved, 26 people stood up in public comment to support it. No individual spoke against the EDE. Professional planning associations have also recognized the value of the EDE with 3 planning awards, including 2 of them statewide. The community organizations that were involved with creating that EDE have re-engaged. We sort of got the band back together for the update. We're referencing ourselves as shareholders rather than stakeholders. We think the word shareholders represents better our vested interest in Salinas as owners effectively that share directly in the results of the ED. The community engagement is specifically called for in the EDE. So we appreciate the city manager's support, and I believe he's authentic in his commitment to community engagement and has demonstrated that by supporting our work. So tonight we're respectfully requesting the City Council also endorse and support our continued engagement in cooperating with the city to develop updates to the EDE. And this would include potential deletions, edits, and priorities that would merit inclusion in the general plan.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Good to see you.
Hello, council members and commissioners. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Christy Cromings. I'm representing the Central Coast Builders Association. And I've been working with the construction industry for 24 years, 19 of which we have been streamlining the permit center in the city of Salinas. And for those 19 years, it has been short-staffed. And that's been the excuse of why permitting can't move forward in a timely and expedited way. So I see the general plan as our update on the general plan, and I say our because it belongs to all of the city, that this is the moment when we update it to streamline some of the processes that have held back the permitting process. So there's a lot of things in it. They're just reading it and interpreting it the way that they have to, and I commend the staff for all the work that they've done on this. But it needs to be updated and made a little easier for people to get their ADU done, to get their sidewalk done. It needs to be easier for people to be able to get permits. And that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Kristen.
Good evening, Karen Cameron, concerned Salinas resident. I emailed you earlier with some concerning questions that I hope you discuss and challenge you to dig deeper. In regards to Salinas Vision 2040 and the future of my city, I think of how to create a livable and sustainable city that I want to continue to live in. My number one concern, the number one reason I can think of that I would move away is environmental health. I'm already allergic to formaldehyde after moving to Salinas, and I don't want any further health hazards to me or the people around me. We live in the salad bowl of the world, mass producing for the entire world, and that doesn't come without pesticides, fumigants, fertilizers that affect our health. I found that environmental justice was minimized tonight. I actually was at the Environmental Justice Workshop for Salinas Vision 2040. Still have this, it's gotten a lot of mileage. Look at the two in the purple. One water quality, one pesticides pollution burden. Extremely purple, purple means 90 to 100% pesticide accumulation. This was in 2022, a draft map from Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. I've asked a lot of questions, haven't gotten any answers, and it's very concerning to me. You talk about improving the air quality, but I question how can we measure your growth if we don't really know our air quality now? We don't know what we're breathing because CDPR removed the air monitoring system for pesticides about a decade ago. EPA comes in and does convenient headlines. We have the cleanest air quality in this state, but they're measuring something quite different, not the pesticides. So I challenge us, how can we think ahead? How can we really celebrate, be a community to celebrate? We can be that organic community that leads the world, not only in veggies, but in organic veggies, and there are ways that we can do that. Also look at the environmental safety concerns of Moss Landing, future battery energy storage systems, ammonia clouds, other things that could impact our community. So thank you for your time and your concern.
Thanks, Karen.
Council members, commissioners, city attorney, city manager, Yolanda Hayes here. I attended my first 2040 general plan meeting in 2002. At that time, there was a lot of hype about building expressways and building homes towards the south and connecting San Juan Bautista and Hollister to Salinas, and I've never heard anything more about that. The other thing that I also attended another meeting where I was told that they were going to bring the park on Hebron Heights, Cesar Chavez Park, and connect it to Natividad Creek Park. I've never heard anything more on that. And I don't know how they were going to do it. I don't know if they even had, if I asked at that time if they even planned, if they knew how much all this was going to cost. It's hard to predict long-term, especially 40 years, how much something's going to cost with the rising costs. But those are some of the things that I've not heard anything about. Are those still in the plans to connect Cesar Chavez Park to Natividad Creek Park? What about the expressways to connect San Juan Bautista, Hollister to 101 and to expand 101? I've not heard anything about that. There is a lot of turnaround in Salinas. We have had, especially in my area, I'm in District 6, Creek Bridge, and we have a creek that's never been attended to. It's a mess. We talk about that we need more parks. Well, I just did a tally yesterday on how many parks Salinas had, and it was about 40 to 50 parks. I went by them, about maybe 10 today, all in a mess. They weren't kept up or anything, so maintenance is a big issue. Car Lake, I've never seen anybody there. The new park that we've built off of Sherwood. So I'm just concerned about everything that's going on, and hopefully the Allison Vibrancy Plan and downtown Salinas will someday come to an end. Thank you.
Thanks, Yolanda.
Hello, my name is David Masonev, and I just have a bunch of questions, and I don't know if they're going to, and statements. But first of all, I want to say thank you to the staff. How cool. You did it yourselves. It's been one of my biggest pet peeves is we don't do it in-house enough. Very good. You had to feel a little overwhelmed because this is quite a plan. My feeling on this, looking at it, is I don't see any baby steps. I see a really broad view of what needs to be done in the city over the next 20 years, but I don't see any way to get there. Maybe that's going to be in the plan. I don't know. I haven't read the whole thing, so I can't say. But it needs to be prioritized. That's a key word, prioritized. I personally think that the plan needs to be reduced, and we need to be more focused so that we can actually come back a year from now and say, hey, look, we got something done. And the year after that, we can say, hey, look, we got more done. And I think it's important that we have successes. If we don't have success, what's the point of all this? So those are the things. And the other thing is infrastructure. It's the most important thing up here. If we don't keep our sewer systems in check, if we don't keep our water systems and our electricity and everything that keeps the city moving and the streets, and we don't take care of them, the rest of this stuff is minutia. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, David.
Hey, Mary Ann.
Mary Ann Worden. Just want to remind you that next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend is our Portuguese festival. So that will be 101 years old. So I want to make sure all of you are reminded that to come. And you, the people that are on the Planning Commission, I want to tell you, when you're planning these homes, make sure those homes have bedrooms big enough to put a bed in there besides just a little one little tiny bed. If they're not big enough, at least to have, and I'm talking about the children's, usually the master bedrooms are big enough, but not the children's. Some of them are only big enough for a crib. I complained about that. So make sure you're big enough that you can at least put maybe a double bed and have enough room for their desk and their dressers in there, because it's not been happening in these homes, because I go check on them. So make sure you do that. And make sure that you make these developers pay for their roads, and make sure that our city does, with the money, build the roads the way they were supposed to, because in Baranda didn't. And I know that for a fact. We were supposed to have 4 lanes all the way. And they were supposed to be built as the homes were being built. I wanted to make sure, so I asked the developer, and he said yes. So make sure we do that, because the money disappeared and the road is just barely getting done now. And it's not all the way, because we're a mess. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Ann.
Good afternoon, Jose Guerra, Montevilla Community. I noticed your Zoom's not working. I tried to get on Zoom and it's not available. Tried it like 3 or 4 times. Once again, I love all the great presentations. Thank you. They did an in-house one. I'd like to know what it costs to do the in-house one, because every time we do one, it's like $900,000 to do a little survey of what we're going to do in the next 20 years. So 2002, we're 2025, so we're only, 23 years behind, and we haven't done anything? I think we're the last development, right, Montevilla? 2004, 2005? We got to get on it, guys. Come on. People need housing. We need to reach out to ag. All you ag supporters out here, please reach out to your ag personnel and have them, give up a little bit of money and get some stuff done. Get some grants. Federal grants, state grants. You guys are all intelligent up here. Let's do something with that. Let's take care of what we need to do. Let's take care of Salinas. Let's take care of the water. Take care of the water, take care of the pipes, the streets. We have a long way to go. We're trying to build parks and stuff. We can't even drive our cars down the road without getting a flat. We want to build another park, 8.1 million. I mean, I don't know how many streets you can fix at that, but can the park wait a little bit longer? I mean, no disrespect to nobody, but I think we have other priorities. You know, our lighting, you go to East Salinas, there's no lighting out there. I don't know what else to tell you guys. I mean, I can't work for Public Works and tell people what to do. I can only put in concerns and, oh yeah, they're taken care of. I go back and I ask, how'd you take care of it? Went to a different department. Well, which department? They don't even know. It gets lost. The permit center is a joke. I'm sorry, that permit center is a real joke. I've been there. No disrespect to anybody that works there, but I think we need better management there. And I want to thank all you guys for, you know, having the guts to be up here and take our abuse, take our concerns and you know, and learn from us. Get the stuff we need to get done because we need you. Let's build Salinas better, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Peter Zalai, North Salinas. Just a couple of comments. I didn't see enough of an emphasis on building housing for low to moderate income people, which I think is the greatest need in our town. And the 1,600 units that you're proposing in the future growth area, I'm guessing is single-family homes. Where I live in North Salinas, houses were built in 1970, and the houses are going for about $560 per square foot. And I'm guessing the average house size is probably 1,800 square feet. And I understand selling a house is different than building a house, but if you use that as a rough measure, that's $1 million. So I don't know if these houses that you're building are $1 million houses. If they are, you're not building housing for Salinas, for the people who live here who need housing. We need low to moderate income housing, which I'm guessing is a lot of apartments. And so you need to be looking at infill opportunities, and you need to be looking at high density housing. I don't see that in this plan. Maybe I missed it. And the second comment that I would make is, in terms of the permit center, it is not just a function of the number of people that you have working there. 3 years ago, I built an ADU. I had a horrible experience with the permit center because it all depended on who you ran into. If you ran into, I'll make up a name, Mary, she was great. If you had the misfortune of running into Bob, you were in hell. And so it's not just a matter of how many people you have. It's a matter of how they're trained, how they're led. So I understand that government is always about more. They never say they have enough. But sometimes the issue is leadership and training.
Thank you. All right, anyone else from the public? Okay. We're not Zooming, and does that preclude YouTubing?
That's correct. The YouTube is live, and so is Comcast 25, but we do have technical difficulties with Zoom, so no comment on Zoom today.
Very good. All right, with that, why don't you see if you have any final comments from your crew, and then we'll have council.
Any final comments from the planning commissioners? Commissioner Gutierrez.
Just want to say thank you for the presentation and look forward to what's coming for Salinas in the future.
Commissioner Almanza Larios.
Sorry, well, I want to start with thank you for the staff that we have now. It seems that all the concerns kind of revolve around staffing. Salinas is growing, that means everything should grow with it. And just keeping that in mind, thank you for the extensive work, and let's continue it together and continue to stay consistent. Thank you.
Commissioner Meeks.
I'd like to also say thank you for the presentation. It's one of the best I've seen. And I'll save my questions and stuff for the Planning Commission. I have tons of them.
Commissioner Ruck.
I'll say thank you very much for your explanations in going through this. I do appreciate it. I am concerned about anybody who has a tentative map in. I hope it's a vesting tentative map, because if you adopt a new general plan, you could set someone who just has a tentative map in back. So just warn them of what's coming when they bring in a map. Thanks.
Commissioner Purnell?
I will be brief as well. I just wanted to extend my gratitude and also just say that everyone in the room and the city, I think, can attribute a part of how this community functions and the heartbeat of this community to Alfred Diaz-Infante. So I wanted to extend a personal thank you to Monica and all of our steering commissions and TAC meetings, Vision Salinas, AVP. We spent many nights together, and I know Alfred was there. And one of the big things he always asked us to maintain was the EJ plan. And I don't think if Monica hadn't pushed, we wouldn't have EJ incorporated because it was optional. So this has been an extension of Alfred's voice through Monica. So I just want to say thank you for that. And that's all.
Commissioner Rocamora?
Yes, I also want to say thank you to the staff for putting it together. My only comment is basically the permitting. I brought that up earlier. Over 4 years ago, I was introduced to a permitting playbook that was shown to me. Have you guys ever thought of working with the developers or the contractors or the architects, getting them involved? Because they're the ones out there working that need to get these permits through. My suggestion, and just a comment, is working with these architects, developers, contractors, and putting together how the permitting process should work to get this going faster. And that's just my suggestion. Maybe reach out to them. That playbook, it does make sense, because this was over 4 years ago, and I know this has been a problem for many years. And just listening to all the people talking, it's all about the permitting, okay? And maybe that's why we don't grow. It's, you know, a lot of contractors, a lot of developers don't want to build here because it takes too long. But I think we need to talk to the developers, talk to the contractors, architects, get them involved in this process. And maybe that's how you could structure your permitting process. Thank you.
And then I'd like to say thank you to everyone as well, also the community, because there has been a lot of community support in this process. For several years, I was attending some of those very first meetings where there was like 2 people that showed up. So the city has done a lot to get better engagement and reach out to the community, so you can see that progress. My comments are around, I kind of visualize like we have come to a place where realizing that sometimes our processes that have been in place, we're creating kind of bottlenecks for ourselves. So as we're going through the general plan, I have concerns about it all being pieced separately, and then how are we going to then connect it all so that the processes are not held up once you get to the next step. One thing that I remember in one of our planning commission meetings is that the commissioners had great questions, but the response was always, oh, that'll be addressed once we get to this point. And it never comes back to planning commission. So another thing is that we haven't had a whole lot of business. You can hear the public perceives that we are involved in a lot of this process, and we have very minimal involvement in the decision-making. It's staff that presents to us, and I think that you're kind of missing out on the people that have volunteered their civic time to the community and to the city by not engaging us as much. And from what I hear, there were some rules or policies that were changed at some point, but I'd like to see for the next 20 years that you really beef up the commissions and utilize the talents that the community has, as a whole. And, I think the one last thing I wanted to mention was about finances, which it is a financial concern now. But as you said, sorry, Mr. Moore, I'm going to pick on you for a second, but when you said that I remember that time because I was a mortgage broker during that period, and it was booming. There was a lot of money flowing from all directions. And by us not planning for that possibility again, I think we may be missing out on some opportunities. So keep that in mind, that just because we are where we are now, if we can look at the other areas of economic development, which is why I think the EDE piece is valuable and being implemented into different areas, that we may not have that challenge if we put some more focus on that. So yes, we want to be, mindful, but we don't want to allow that to stop the possibilities of what we can do with this city, So anyway, that's my comment.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Sandoval, we'll start with you. Any final comments?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I know this is years in the making with a lot of community engagement. Some folks have been engaged for, sounds like 20 years. So I want to thank the staff for all their work and the community for being involved. I agree, there does need to be some kind of intentionality about focusing on low and moderate housing. You know, be intentional with our maintenance. I do think there is a need for a permitting oversight and improvement committee to really monitor and track the progress of not only how many permits are coming in, but at what stage they're at and how quick they move through those different processes. I mean, we do have an opportunity to engage a lot of professionals, but make sure we're also not just engaging them, but we're doing the follow-up and able to hold ourselves accountable to make sure we're progressing. I agree there needs to be intentional growth to maintain our parks. And we really should focus on standardizing our community engagement in the community. Sometimes we have these amazing processes for engagement, but then there'll be another project where it doesn't necessarily have the same level of engagement. And I think the community would benefit from knowing exactly what we're gonna do and not hearing, I think, watching these council meetings for many, many years, we've always heard we need more community engagement. And like I said, if we can just standardize it and remove that variable of maybe there won't be community engagement for this issue, it'd really be beneficial. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Tony?
When Mr. Mendez came on board, and I concur with what the architect said, you're a man of integrity. And as you build your team, which you are, because what I'm hearing right now, I heard it 20 years ago, it's just different people. Consistency is critical. If any council adopts anything, we need to start working on it. If for some reason we can't work on it, we need to figure out a way, how do we continue instead of just putting it on the shelf? I can visualize somewhere in City Hall, maybe inside the basement in the museum, there's binders of discussions, many, many hours, valuable information. And you know what we do? Instead of getting that binder and dusting it off, we come back and talk about the same thing. I think, Mr. Mendez, and I'm looking at your staff here, Ms. Brinton, not only are you hiring highly professional young people here, but I see passion in these community meetings. I see these professionals engage with the community. I get concerned when I hear questions. Hey, I've been asking questions, but nobody gets back to me. I've never liked that. You know, success with anything is to really care about what we're doing. And even though we're not a private entity, we're not a nonprofit, we need to really think as a business because we got bills to pay as well. We're a service business provider. And sometimes, and I would concur, there's employees and then there's employees. There's employees that don't like people. And then there's employees that really engage with people. So you got to figure out what kind of team are we going to build when somebody comes in to, whether it's the permit center, the police department or whatever. People should not feel intimidated or scared. They should feel, you know what, this is a place where they're going to help me. I want to be able to be a place like that. When this door gets open here pretty soon, there's a beautiful wooden sign as you're walking in. And all it says is, we are people working for people for a better community. We're a service provider. I hope that we've engaged today on really making something happen. And you know what's the easy thing for me tonight? Is just go get the lawnmower and clean up Natividad Creek. I mean, I think that way. What's the big, get my truck and let's go clean the weeds. I think that way. But sometimes it gets so complicated. We got to have a meeting, a committee, and man, let's just get in the truck. Andrew Sandoval, get in the truck and bring the shovel and let's go. I think that way. I got in trouble with the union one day because I did take my lawnmower. But sometimes simplicity, we complicate it for some odd reason, and I don't understand that. But you know what? I really strongly believe we're going the right way. And team, I want to thank you for your service. Mr. Moore, you did an awesome job. You really did. And I want to thank the Planning Commission. Today, we don't have sandwiches, but there's some snacks right there. You're welcome to them. I want to thank you for your service. I mean that, because you know what? This takes a lot of time. And like somebody said, sometimes we get a beating up here. But the people that we serve have that luxury to criticize us, to argue with us, and to threaten us. And then at the end of the day, we tell them, we work for you because we want a better community. So I want to thank you for your service. And colleagues, we have a job to do here. Whether we agree on things, whether we like each other or not, it doesn't matter. If there's something that we need to do, let's get it done. Somebody says, man, just go out there and do something. I think it was David. You know, something small, get it done. That way we can brag the next Tuesday we did it. Let's not create more committees. Let's create a cleaning group or something. You guys understand what I'm saying? I think it's important. And you know what? I want to thank the Planning Commission. Some of you guys brought up some awesome questions. This is a beautiful city, and our children, I was thinking about when we first started all this, 2002, imagine some of these kids are adults already. And we want to be able to build rooms that they can fit a bigger bed in there. Yes. So thank you, Mr. City Manager. I want to say thank you again, and thank you to everybody. I think we're going to do good. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Jose?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember. I wasn't born in 02, I was born in 99, but we're definitely one of those people that wanting to see some progress on this, particularly on the housing thing. We're gonna build me a room somewhere, right? Hopefully it's a house.
There you go.
Or independent standalone unit. All right. So first and foremost, wanna thank staff. Everyone always said thank you, so gracias for all the hard work that you guys put into it, and also the steering committee. I know myself and Mayor Donahue were some of the people that were on that committee before we made the fund transition over to City Council. So I understand that's also a lot of work and time and commitment that goes into those meetings. As we saw, this process didn't start yesterday, last year, or the year before that. It's been an ongoing multi-year process, and you guys are about to be re-engaged and reactivated. So we hope you guys see it through all the way and we get this adopted. Also, really want to touch on the importance of this plan and, you know, kind of the significance of it moving forward. Again, touching on, I was born in 99. I have Jessica Almanza Rios right here, who's also the youngest planning commissioner on the dais. And, you know, it's really us at the end of the day, not to disparage anyone, but that really are gonna have to not just adopt this plan, implement it and see it through, right? It's really gonna be unto the next generation to implement this plan and see those results, right? Because if we've seen and learned anything, it's that with the progress or lack of progress we've made in certain items, I've definitely seen progress in some areas, right? I remember downtown Salinas was not what it was 5 years ago. It's not what it was 10 years ago. We've seen that transformation, right? And I think the community is ready to see that same level of catalytic transformation throughout the city. And said it before, but I have no shortage of belief and confidence in the city's team, administratively, the people on the ground, the people, you know, doing the day-to-day work, whether it's filling potholes, mowing the grass. We have an excellent team that we're going to continue to grow and, you know, meet the needs of our residents. I also want to touch very quickly on housing because that was a very big point of discussion, but also for myself. The housing element is a separate item, right, from this general plan. So just like the economic development element, it'll have its own separate discussion. The housing element was already adopted in 2023, so we just had that review, I think, back in either January or February, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll get another jab at that ongoing, and part of that request back then was to have like a housing dashboard. So we'll continue to have these conversations on an ongoing basis, analyzing and looking at what are those pain points, what are those points where we can help relieve and streamline some of our processes to get housing online quicker. And just one last point, and so kind of be an ask, would be to have a presentation from the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. To Councilmember Sandoval's point, seawater intrusion is definitely a big issue. I'm the appointee for the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and just very quickly, I know it's not necessarily the general plan, in terms of timeline, in September, October, we will be submitting to the state Department of Water Resources what our 3 primary options are for that. All of them have a $1 billion price tag for the capital improvement project alone. That's just to build out the project, and all of them have an ongoing operations and maintenance costs of roughly, depending on the project, $100 to $300 million on an ongoing basis. Again, talking about who's going to bear the brunt of, the decisions that we make today, it's going to be our younger people. It's going to be, the generation of the future who are going to live perpetually with these additional costs, whether it's the general plan update, whether it's us building up to the Eastern Bypass, or it's, the very immediate and real need to have safe drinking water and an ongoing source for that. Very quickly, there's 3 proposed projects. There's the demand management, aquifer storage and recovery, and brackish groundwater restoration program. Again, all of which have billion-dollar price tags and hundreds of millions of dollars of ongoing operations and maintenance. Those are really tough discussions we're going to have to be having. And just in terms of timeline, if there's any possibility of having a presentation from the GSA, either when we come back in August or very briefly before we make that decision in September, I know I, as the appointee, would like at least council direction on what the position as a city will be on the GSA for that particular vote.
Okay. Maria.
I want to start off thanking staff. I'm sure a lot of you recall going through this process. You probably go through your mind on a regular basis, like the parts that you've written, and try to anticipate what questions we might have and how to answer those questions. I think something like 20 years ago, I was appointed to the Monterey County Planning Commission. I often joke having like post-traumatic stress disorder from it. And I say that because at the time when I was appointed, Monterey County Supervisor Fernando Armenta said, hey, the county's going through their general plan process. And your appointment is going to take place in about 4 to 6 weeks. By the time you get on the Planning Commission, I remember this conversation, I will never forget it. By the time you start in January, they'll probably be done with it. You won't have to worry about it. Like, okay, good. 3 years later, the county passed its general plan, and I remember going and sitting through meetings where staff would come in with a trolley of bankers' boxes from the public comment. And I remember, like, it was three boxes. And as some of you know, when agendas are prepared, if the meeting's on Wednesday, 72 hours is when you get all of this material. And I just remember being overwhelmed and asking myself, how in the world do I go through 3 boxes of written material from the public and trying to articulate all of their views and perspectives and inquiries in a matter of 3 days? It's impossible. I don't know anyone who can read 3 boxes of material. And so I really commend all of you, because quite often it's like people questioning you, like, where are you at on, circulation, housing element, land use policies, all of that. So I really commend, your work and everything that you have all done as a team. I know it's not easy work. And the fact that we are doing this in-house is even that much better. It also gives you great leverage. I hope, none of you decide to ever leave the city, because if you do, it's great leverage to become a consultant and go back to the city. It's like, oh, hey, you got questions? I wrote that part. So okay, you're all smiling, great. There is a positive to that. So thank you for all your work, and I applaud you. The only thing I would recommend is, we have the census count, right? I just think it would be a good practice for the city and the planning that we just kind of factor that in, like after every census count, right? Because the census count's going to give us, some pretty good numbers in terms of what the population growth is, right? So this last one, I think we saw that the city of Salinas grew over a little bit by 10,100 people, right? So that really tells us a lot about what circulation might look like, what housing might look like. And so I just think it's a good practice, right? So, after a census count that we start the process. When I heard that it's been since 2002, since we last updated our general plan, that was 23 years ago. And so here we are, and I feel like that's almost a challenge on the department, because the department's like, operating 23 years later with policies that were written 23 years ago. That's a whole generation. And before that, that general plan was passed in 1988, which was 14 years. And as some of you know, typically these things are like almost like these larger amendments from the previous one. So we have a 1988, we have a 2002, and then now we have this next one coming up before us. So I just think it would be a good policy. I do want to again bring up the issue of kind of looking into other cities and what they're, what they have in mind in terms of their general plan. I'm not asking you to become the experts overnight in terms of what other cities are doing. I just think it's a good practice, right? Because we are just one county. In addition, I would also, take a look at the county's current general plan as it relates to circulation. And I continue to bring that up because I know that there are, a number of people that are from the city of Salinas that commute and support the hospitality industry as the workforce. And in terms of circulation, we see it every morning and at night, like on Davis Road and Blanco Road. And as someone that's also a part of that can attest to it, there are people that are jumping off of, Blanco Road and Davis Road and getting onto Reservation Road and cutting through CSUMB just to get into the peninsula. And so that really says a lot about the problem that the county has and our adjacent cities have when it comes to circulation. And so I think it's just a good practice so that we can anticipate any future circulation issues that we may have. And then also, as we look at those other city general plans, if they're planning to double or triple in size, again, we need to think about what impact that's going to have on circulation, on housing, and economic development. So again, not asking all of you to become experts overnight over it, but to just check in. And then lastly, I know that planning commissioners have their respective associations, and one of the big challenges when it comes to general plans is litigation. Honestly, it's litigation. There are people and there are individuals that, they don't like general plans and they see it as an opportunity for litigation. And it's very important to me as a council member that we protect our general plan from litigation by trying to be ahead of the game and anticipate any litigation. So I think quite often we do find, there are probably some trends, right? If people are jumping on the salamander protection or critical view shed, kind of, bandwagon and use that as litigation to prevent a general plan or stalling a general plan. I just think it's a best practice that we stay ahead of the game and make sure that we protect our general plan from litigation. If it can be litigation-free, more kudos to you guys that you can say, hey, not only did we put a general plan together, it was litigation-free. And so again, thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you, Gloria.
Okay, thank you. I've sat through some general plans in my past, and I'm sitting through this one. And I want to really thank you because you did it in-house, and that shows that you are all very, very intelligent. You're professional. Wow, I sat here and I go, they did it in-house? Wow, kudos to you all. And I wanted to say I just want us to make a quick comment. I know we're not talking about so much about the housing element, but I just want us to think out of the box for, this general plan when it comes to housing, because we know we need housing and we need to start building now. So we heard about streamlining the permit center, great. But other cities, not just in California, but in Arizona, manufactured homes that people can afford. And I'm talking about low-income, affordable housing. So I just want to mention that. Let's think out of the box and for that. And also that the community engagement was brought up, and I want to thank you for that. And of course, I'm really happy about the LSL marketplace, the LSL vibrancy, and our future growth. So we have a lot of work to do, and you know, we're a team, right? And we need to support this general plan and get started. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Margaret?
Well, Jonathan, I want to thank you for the very high-level report that you gave. And I also want to commend you, the staff that put together the entire agenda, because there was so much detail. I wish I had the history that some of you have about all the hard work that went into that. There's been so much work being done to support the general plan over the years. And I am not going to say that I've read everything because there was so much information. It takes a lot to digest. So Renee will be, I'll be firing some questions at you in the future. But there's a lot of work that went into that. I want to thank our partners who are in the room or who have helped us in the past. Peter, thank you for all the work that you've done in the economic element. I mean, I really appreciate that. A lot of it has been put into this plan, and that's important. We need to hear from you. There are so many subject matter experts in this community, and I'm glad that we're reaching out to them, engaging with them, and we should continue to do so at the highest level possible. I really enjoyed the public comments tonight. I want to thank all of you because I hope that everybody really took to heart some of the comments that were made tonight. Criticism is part of it. We have to accept our weaknesses in the areas that we need to shore up and do a better job, and I think we all know where those are, and we're working diligently to do that. I don't think any of us are here to be status quo type people. We want change, we expect results, and our community deserves it. I agree with you, David. These are big, heavy lifts. When I read, the list of them, I thought, good God, how are we going to even begin to prioritize them? But we have to start that process. And let's take some of the small wins when we can, and then work on the bigger projects in a prioritized manner. Larissa, I really want to thank you because I've been to a couple planning commission meetings, and I kind of said, wow, we've got all these great minds up here. Why are we just voting on alcohol permits and things like that? When you guys are subject matter experts in your fields, you understand the city, and I think that we can utilize them in a much more meaningful way. So I hope we can find ways to engage our planning commission in the future. And I don't know what that looks like, but I know that they've got more to give. I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And I think we heard customer service, we heard training, we heard lack of resources. That should not be a barrier because there are ways around that. We've heard staffing. So all the comments that were made tonight, I really want to take those to heart. They're really important. We heard a lot about infrastructure and the importance of infrastructure versus building more parks if we can't maintain them. So maintenance and infrastructure are really important to me and my constituents. So thank you again. Let's continue to work on a general plan that fits our city. It is our city, and this is our general plan, and I want our entire city to embrace it and engage with us in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Just a couple things in closing before we adjourn. I was on the last general plan, so this will be my last general plan. I don't remember everything clearly, but what I am quite clear on is the community outreach in this process has been very good, very strong, and I think the timing of this presentation is important because at a really inappropriate juncture, other folks are re-engaging, so that really broadens the input, takes advantage of subject matter experts as well as community input. And there have been subject matter experts along the way, but I think this is certainly the right time to broaden the base before we get ready for the big finish. So, but I just want to acknowledge the community engagement piece from my perspective has been very good. I think the issue of elevating the commissions is something we need to talk about more and more. We do have a lot of talented people, the folks who take the time to serve. We want to honor that service. And commissions are a really good place to get a little more in-depth and focus. You know, staff, publicly noticed, appearances on Channel TV, Channel 25, can't beat that. But it's also a chance to engage a little bit more in terms of Q&A, because I know folks have questions. So I think this issue of elevating the commissions and their role in the community process just on an ongoing basis is an important thing. And then the other thing is, and what I've been struck by and just kind of mindful all the way along, you know, there are a lot of elements here, but, you know, it's interesting, you know, slide. Last slide, no pictures, last phase. Phase 3, complete zoning overhaul. Kind of a minor detail, because that's really important, and I think at the end of the day, the heart of the matter, and answers a lot of questions that people have. How do you maintain consistency and continuity? And then frankly, how do you eliminate some of the, whether they're contradictory or uncertain elements, so staff can perform a little more rapidly? Obviously, there's elements to that, but I think that being attentive to the opportunity for a complete zoning overhaul is an important statement in this document. So I'll certainly echo, well done, and it is good to hear that it was done in-house, because that speaks to a lot more familiar, you know, the document becomes much more of a living document, and that's a good thing. So before you all run off and be consultants, hang around and work with the implementation of the general plan. If Aurelio is, you know, somehow knows something the rest of us don't know, we hope, we like you as a staff, so we hope you stick around. So with that, there's no action required tonight. We were just supposed to listen. We did, and provide some input, and we did, and we'll be back next week. Rumor has it we might pass a budget, so at a council meeting. Thank you, everyone.